Parents want to do the right thing, but it's really important that they do the right thing for everybody. It's not just about you. Probably the hardest part of the transition was separating emotion from real conversation.
The fairness and equality, there's just so many moving pieces. When you start to bring family and business and estate, it sounds like it did take a while to sort of sort out, but there were structured conversations.
Hey there, and welcome to Your Next Gen Friend, a successor's guide to business transition, a podcast for figuring out what's next in or beyond your family business. I'm Andrea Carpenter, transition strategist and second gen. Around here, we talk about the real stuff, family dynamics, identity, leadership, wealth, and how to define success on your own terms. Here's to finding your own way forward. I'm so glad you're here.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Your Next Gen Friend. So my line of work is really interesting in succession planning, and that's interesting because most people only go through this once in their life, maybe twice, once as the purchaser and once as the person ultimately leaving. So whenever I get the chance to meet someone who is just finishing a transition, it's really exciting because they still remember all the details, the decisions, the feelings, the emotions that come with a transition. I am a year and a half out of the first time I negotiated my purchase. And even then, some of it is a little fuzzy. So I'm super excited to have Mitch Gambert with us today, third generation owner of Gambert Shirts in Newark, New Jersey. Mitch just completed the full handoff from his parents. And so today we're going to talk about what that was actually like, what went well, lessons learned, and what it means to kind of carry that legacy and craft into his own generation. So, Mitch, I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks for having me, Andrea. Look forward to sharing my journey with you.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, maybe you can give a little bit of backstory about how you first came into the business and how long ago that was and
Sure.
roles that you had.
The quick and skinny on our story, our company, it's actually, I wouldn't say there's any quick and skinny to it. It was founded in 1933 by my grandfather. And through the 60s and 70s, my father and three of his brothers all joined together and worked as under the family name. Then in the 70s, they split up, and at that time there were two Gamberts, my father and one brother, and then the other two brothers stayed together. Then in the 90s, my one cousin had been working with my father, and he's decided to go out and go out on his own. So there was literally at one time in the marketplace of all making the same exact product. We are a woven cotton button-up custom shirt manufacturer. So we have retailers around the country that sell our shirts. At one time, there were three Gamberts all doing the exact same thing, all within about a 3-mile radius of one another as well here in the city of Newark. And then, so my journey, I grew up in the factory, literally started picking up pins off the floor, helping in the shipping department, learning how to spread, learning, as a 19-year-old, I was kind of learning the payroll, how to work with ADP back in 1991, whatever it was. And then I moved to Boston, did my own thing up there for about 9 years. Then 2001, 9/11 rolled around, and that sort of changed my perspective on what I was doing, where I was doing it, and where I wanted to be. And I moved back home. At the time, my parents were considering selling the business to their employees. But I said, look, would you consider kind of freezing that plan and give me a shot at it? And they completely reinvested themselves in the business. Like I said, this is 2001. And from there, I just took to the business like a fish to water. It was sort of, I enjoyed every aspect of it. I enjoyed working with my parents. My father primarily was the main person here on a daily basis, having lunch with him, talking to him, asking him questions, dealing with the ins and outs of doing business. dealing with unhappy customers, dealing with happy customers, how to build the line. We grew the business back in 2001 to 2023, 3x. So it was a long trudge, and we got there, but it was a lot of challenges, and but it was a great appreciation of working with my parents. I often, it was always, how do you separate mom and dad from business partners or parents or bosses, for that matter? And I give a lot of credit to my parents through those early days of my career here, in allowing me to make a lot of mistakes and learn from those mistakes on my own. But they also let me have a lot of successes, and gave full credit on those successes. So there's a lot to be said for that. And the fact is, I think those 9 years that I lived in Boston and did everything from construction to sales, and just tried my hand at different things, and kind of finding my way in life. That was probably the smartest path I could have taken. So that's kind of my journey. In summary, actually, by the way, back in 2012, one of my two cousins, joined their businesses in 2012, I think it was. And then coming out of COVID, we wound up buying the other remaining cousin. And from 2021 on, there's just been, we're back to one Gambert factory in the United States.
Okay, cool. And so it's 2001, and you're thinking about coming back to the business, and you already have an inkling that maybe you want to buy it. Like, where did that come from? Was there some historic dream that you were going to do that, or where did that idea originate?
No, I should be clear. In 2001, I had no clue that I was going to buy the business. I'm one of, we're one of six siblings, six kids. One of my siblings passed away back in 1994, but there are five of us. And in 2001, I had no idea what I was going to do or how this thing was going to land. It was just an opportunity to try something different. I had kind of danced around. I had worked for a company up in, like I said, Massachusetts, and was quite successful at it until 9/11 happened. And then our business dried up. My boss said, "Hey, we got to take a break. And I'm not sure when I'll be able to bring you back on," because we sold to a lot of municipalities and federal agencies. But then everybody kind of went into this whole, security systems and that type of thing. So I just sort of came down here I miss New Jersey, and, let me give it a shot. Rather than working as a third party redistributor, why not go right to the source with my family's name on it? The whole idea of transaction of purchasing the business probably started, let's see, I bet 15 years ago, sometime around 2010, somewhere in that neighborhood was when it really started to be like, okay, I'm in this for the long haul. And this is, it needs to start kind of coming together. That was sort of the beginning of it. But even then I had no clue, how I was going to do it.
Yeah. And so did you start the conversation with your parents? Did they approach you and they were starting to get out? How did it all start?
I guess I broached it. It's a while back. I don't remember the exact context of the conversation, but I think it got to the point where I started asking. I think there was around 2014, maybe. They gifted me 25% equity in the business then. And there was a lot of thought into, okay, how do we do this? What is our exit plan? I think like a lot of small business owners, my family parents ran this business thinking it was just going to sustain them till the end. And no real future planning for, well, what do we do next? How do we do it next? And there were a couple different iterations that the business went through in terms of the succession, whether it was, family estate, how it got divided up amongst the siblings, one person, being myself, being the main controller of equity shares so that I had, voting rights. And then the other shares being split up amongst the other siblings. And, from my perspective, it was, listen, I love my brother and sisters. But I don't want to work for them, 20 years down the road, and be paying into their inheritance. It's, and I certainly didn't want to leave anybody like they felt like they were getting the short end of the stick either. So there were a lot of concessions that we wound up kind of going through. I think a lot of it was my parents finding that comfort zone for themselves and knowing they feel good about this. They're taking care of their children in one way, shape, or form. They're leaving a legacy behind for their grandchildren. And, frankly, they also kind of need me without being, this is no arrogance in that statement, but to help to sustain their lifestyle today. I mean, they're both in their, my father's 87, my mother's in her 80s. It's, they've both, but they need a continued revenue stream of some capacity. And that's, so it's worked out for everybody, I think, ultimately. But it was tricky getting there. There's no question about it.
Yeah, the fairness and equality and people who are working in the business and those who aren't working in the business and the dynamics, and then not to mention the intent of your parents and what they want for each of their kids and all of that. And there's just so many moving pieces in when you start to bring family and business and estate and all of these other pieces together. But it sounds like it did take a while to sort of sort out, but there were structured conversations. Did you have facilitated conversations, or were you mostly having them as a family, or what did that look like?
Question. They had a very close friend who was sort of they leaned on this particular man for a lot of their professional directions in terms of things they did, what made sense, what didn't make sense. Unfortunately, he passed away before anything really got resolved. But the interesting thing is I would frequently have conversations with him privately, and he would often say to me, your parents want to do the right thing. They know what you need and they know what the right thing for you is, but it's really important that they do the right thing for everybody. It's not just about you. And while it's been often sort of noted that I do a really good job of separating church and state, between my relationship with my parents and the relationship with my business partners, it wasn't as easy for them. There was a lot of, honestly, not to beat my mother up, and she'll be the first one to admit it, being an Italian, she is very emotional. She was very emotional about a lot of her decisions. My father, being German, was much more concrete in his mindset of, well, it's black and white, and that's just kind of what it is. So there was a lot of push and pull from the two of them. I think in terms of the moderator who kind of came in and sort of helped to facilitate, he did have someone that worked for him, a guy named Dave Curcio, who picked up the ball and really continued to listen to both sides, and sort of help to steer it. And I think if they didn't have that, if we didn't have that, I don't know that we have a deal done, 2 months ago. There's doing this alone. You think, oh, well, it's my parents and it's our family business. And boy, doesn't this make a lot of sense. But you then get to the realization that this is business and it doesn't matter if it's your parents. It's a business decision and there are gives and takes, and there are things that I agreed to in the succession, and that I didn't really feel great about, to be perfectly honest with you. But I knew, for the context of my parents' state of mind and for the ability to sit down at Thanksgiving dinner and Christmas dinner with my siblings, to be able to sit there and look at them in the eye and know, listen, I made some decisions here that benefit you guys more than they benefit me, but you're my family and I can look at you and feel good within myself about those things. But they weren't easy decisions.
Yeah. And there's a lot of wisdom in that, Mitch, because a lot of times, like kind of what you're describing to me, it has this concept of, a lot of our work starts with objectives. Like, what are the objectives that you want to achieve? And there's some that end up being deal breakers. So if you had a deal breaker of, I still really want to be able to sit with the family at Thanksgiving and like be sibling to my siblings, even though it sucks, right? And you like hit those points where like, that's not really ideal, or that's not exactly the way I would transact, or those aren't really the most favorable terms for me. If those other things, right, aren't deal breakers, meaning, okay, I'm willing to give and take a little bit within reason, but still achieve these things that I said are most important. It's hard and it's easy to bring emotion into some of those things, but it sounds like you did a nice job kind of balancing at least like a start of it, right?
Well, I also think in some ways being the youngest member of my siblings might have helped in that. And you're right. There's right and there's not right. I wouldn't call it wrong, but it's just, the matter of, putting on your big boy pants and saying, okay, this is what I have to do. And, there are decisions you make, and not everybody's always going to be happy. And sometimes it's not going to be you. One of the big sticking points for us was, well, for 20 years now, 20 something years, I have built this network in New Jersey. I know car dealers, I know doctors, I know, finance guys, I know bankers, I know lawyers. I think, I've made shirts for pretty much, every category you could want to befriend in the state of New Jersey. Sports athletes, like whatever.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that was always kind of like, well, what happens if you take the business and you grow it 10x and it's suddenly a $50 million business or whatever the math is, and now you're super successful. And well, okay, but that's on my back. And granted, Mom and Dad, you helped me to get it there, but that's on my back. Mm-hmm. And, what it came down to was the realization that, and something, if I'm ever in a position to be able to help one of my siblings or my nieces and nephews, just my character alone, I will help them. Mm-hmm. And but it shouldn't have anything to do with this succession plan. Mm. Where we are right now is what we're negotiating from, not what might be. I also might fail miserably and be broken in 3 years. And then does that mean that they're all going to come in and say, oh, we're going to help pay your mortgage and your car payments and for your kids' college? Of course not. And I wouldn't expect that. Mm-hmm. So it was but it's the what if, and it was always the what if it gets better and better. It was never, well, what if it doesn't get better? And that was my contention, was what ifs, either way, up or down, have nothing to do with where we are right now. Mm-hmm. And I think that was that was a big part of this because, here I am 52 years old, and in a lot of ways I still feel like I'm waiting for my ship to kind of to come in. And I worked from 30 years old or a little or somewhere thereabouts. And I restarted my life when I rejoined this business. When the company I worked for before was an 11-person office doing $4 million a year in sales. And I was quite successful at 27 years old. 9/11 changed everything. And I said, all right, well, I'm going to go try my hand at something different. I'm going to try getting back into the family. But I started from the ground up again. I had no network. The guys I grew up with, they're my friends and I love them to death. I still talk to my high school friends, but they weren't able to network. I had to build a completely new network of peers, of professional peers, of all these things. And we had a lot of great successes, but they were shared successes with my parents. And now here I am at the next frontier of my life. And I'm like starting over again. I mean, this time at 52 years old, same industry, same address, same everything, but it's a completely new thing. And, there's a lot of that you kind of, you have to recognize that with a succession, that it is a matter of starting over. No matter from what point, you might be starting over from a pretty good grounding. You might be starting over from great high elevated grounding, or you might be starting over at a complete reset almost. And that's kind of, there's a lot of variables that go into that you can't control. Whether it's economies, whether it's, political states, whether it's anything. And that was a lot of, for me, there's a lot of rationalization and recognizing those things and saying, okay, well, this is where it's going to be. And this is how I got to kind of move forward.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. What would you say was the most unexpected, difficult, hard or messy part of the transition?
Probably the hardest part of the transition was separating emotion from real conversation. Recognizing that this has to be addressed. That in order for me and you, Mom, to be able to continue to have Sunday dinners and spend time with the grandkids and move forward, we have to recognize that I can't keep paying the car payment. You have to be upfront and clear in expectations, and how things are going to be different. And that was probably the hardest thing to come to grips with. Not so much that I have a problem with being honest, but being honest about difficult conversations with someone that, it's your mother, and, sometimes I felt, I joked with her sometimes. Sometimes I felt like when she was negotiating back with me, I'd be like, Ma, you treating me like I'm communist China. And, I'm like doing a hostile takeover. Like, this is a really weird way for me to be feeling right now. And I don't like the way I feel. And maybe we need to step back and talk again differently, and there were quite a few conversations that didn't always go that calmly, but, but those were probably the hardest things, was where it became emotional pulls on your, a deeply personal relationship.
Yeah. And I think you've really narrowed in on something that's very true, because I think the statistic is 60% of the transitions fail because of the communication, and it's only 4% that fail because of the legal or the financial paperwork, because all that can be sorted out. But if you can't work through some of those emotional pieces and the relationships. And I feel a lot of that in my own transition, and I'm not even related. So then suddenly it becomes mother-son or father-son or sibling relationships. And that like added family layer is just, there's a lot that goes into that. So I think it's awesome that you can recognize that that is really tricky, and also that you were able to work through and push through a lot of that. What would you say is something that went really well that you'd recommend other people would replicate?
Well, definitely having this is two-edged. For me, I think having solid legal representation was a really important thing. Having somebody that I trusted. I was fortunate. The attorney who represented me, his name is Mitch Gambert. I've known him since I'm 7 years old. He's been a lifelong family friend. He knew me. He knew my parents. His father happened to be the person who advised my parents over the years. So he was really intimately familiar with our family. He wasn't just an attorney that I found on the internet and said, hey, I need some representation in this matter. So he understood a lot of the dynamics of my family. He happened to also go through it, on some level, because he had partnered with his father at one time and they decided to split, and and so he understood the dynamics of family business. So I think that was a really important part. I think the attorney who actually represented my parents wasn't a family friend or a relation in any capacity. And I think that he missed the mark on a few things. But at the end of the day, recognizing that his job was to protect my parents and their interests, that's offset any non-emotional connection. So I think the greatest thing about this was having, and like I said, this guy, Dave Curcio, who helped to sort of facilitate a lot of the conversations as just a intermediary. He was really unbiased in either direction. Just Mel and Lorraine, Mitch needs this. Mitch, Mel and Lorraine need that. And he's helped to put the pieces of the puzzle together in a very non-emotive way. And that was probably the greatest part. I'd say having a good team around you, like anything, was probably the best part of this whole thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so looking forward to the future. The transaction is now finished. You're the owner. What's next for you?
Growth. What's next? I don't know. Continue the legacy. Set it up that hopefully I can be, I'd love, 10x more successful than I was or than I've been. But set it up in a way that it is, it's prepared for the next phase, whether it's, I have 3 kids who are young. They're 15, 11, and 8. So they've got a while to figure out where they're going to land in life. But the idea for me is to set it up so that in 10, 15 years, there can be a plan, whether I can walk away from it and go sit on a beach for the rest of my life in flip-flops, knowing that my kids are situated in the business or prepared to be situated in it, or that we can set it up that I can maybe walk away from it with some great sale to some, big company. Who knows? I mean, it's wide open what the opportunity can be. I just know that for the first time in 20 something years, I am the captain of the ship, and it's not a matter of, it's not about ego. I've never been about ego. It's about knowing, though, that every decision I ever made up to this point, I always made with the best intention for me and my parents. Now I'm going to take a chance, and it's for me. And like I said, if I become so successful that I can help my family in an effort that they need help in, that's obviously on the purely regularly stated level, but it's just about setting up for the future and kind of knowing that I get it right. They say if businesses that get past a third generation usually set up a fourth generation for more success, because we kind of learn what happened between generations 2 and 3. It's hard. I've read a lot about generational businesses, and getting into the third generation is tricky, and it certainly hasn't disappointed in that expectation.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I think added, like, we didn't even touch on all the other entities kind of coming back and rolling back in. And like, when you just think of the ecosystem of where it kind of started and expanded, and now it's kind of contracted back into you, just really interesting and super fascinating. So,
yeah, no, I don't have, people always ask me, what's your plan? What's this? What's that? It's a very fluid business. It's manufacturing, where we make a product in the United States. The global temperature right now is really weird. It's supply chain's a mess. There's a lot of policies that aren't, regardless of what side of the fence you're on, there's a lot of policies that are very confusing right now. So it's hard to really set yourself up. Did we miss the e-commerce boat? I don't know. Could we get into it? Maybe, but I have, a retail base of 300 resellers around the country that I have to try and protect. So maybe I do. Like, how do you navigate all these things? I don't know. It's hard. All I know is I want to make it solid and stable and clear, not clear as mud, clear as water. It's, so.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate your time.
It was my pleasure.
Maybe we can finish up with the 3 signature questions that I have. So my first is, what have you chosen not to inherit?
I've elected to not receive any of the family estate. And my 3 children will collectively get a third, after my 4 siblings have reached a said limit on what's left in the family estate. So that, that's pretty much that.
Yeah. What's a part of your story that you're learning to honor?
My story, I guess, is to continue to operate with integrity and try to do the right thing. It's something I've certainly learned from both my parents on different levels of life, to just, as my father would say, mind your own garden. Just don't worry about anything else, and just do it right.
Yeah. And it's a whole different meaning when you're the person running the business. Yeah. So awesome. Okay. And then to close us out in one word, what are you the first of in your family?
Black sheep.
Why do you say that?
Well, I always kind of marched to my own drum, and did things my way, come hell or high water, whether making mistakes or making good choices, or just in general, not necessarily getting in trouble, but just doing what felt right for me, and didn't really follow the set guidelines that everyone thought you were supposed to follow.
That's awesome. Well, Mitch, thank you for coming on and sharing your story. I really appreciate the insights that you were willing to share with all the listeners who are also approaching their own succession and navigating transitions inside their family businesses. So
it was my pleasure. I hope somebody learned something from it.
That's it for today. I hope today's episode offered some clarity, or at least a little company. If this resonated, I'd be so grateful if you'd share it with another Next Gen. While my podcast is for the successors, you can also check out its sister show, The Business Transition Roadmap, hosted by my business partner, Elizabeth Ledoux. There's lots of great material in business and family succession over there. I hope you'll take a listen. Be well and see you next time.